we're going to talk about where we are currently, what financial threats are looming, and how best to protect Florida from the incursions in our freedoms. So getting here today actually started over a year ago. Those of you who know me well know that back then I was working on health freedom and securing our health freedoms. And one of the things I wanted to do for Floridians, because Florida, we do have a Patient's Bill of Rights, I wanted to make sure it included the term during a declared emergency. I'm on the board of Citizens Council for Health Freedom, and that's one of the things that we were trying to do nationwide. So I was pushing that and working with a lot of people, and we got it done. Thank you, our best governor ever did this. So then I was thinking, okay, so now we have, as Floridians, it's like, yep, we have the right to say no if pandemic XYZ comes up. You have to take this jab, you have to take this treatment, you have to do this. But I'm like, no, I don't. I have the Florida Bill of Rights. I do not have to do that. What could go wrong? Well, are you good with not being able to buy food or fuel for 2 months? And think about that. You have your freedom, but you can't buy food or fuel for 2 months. So what happened for you was that? So the whole thing, the buck stops here. It's like, okay, so how then do we get to where we are now to really button up our freedom financially so that we truly are free and free indeed? So that is what led me on my journey. And then a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, like, okay, who do I have to go to get something like this passed? I already know a lot of people that can say no, who can say yes. And he said, well, Speaker of the House, President of the Senate, Governor. I was like, okay, that's where I went. So I called and I was talking to a lot of people, a lot of things, and I'm going to Solari School, which you'll learn about in a moment, and trying to figure out how can Florida do this? What can we do? And I came across a sovereign state bank and a sovereign state bullion depository. My thought was, let's take the best of what North Dakota has in the sovereign state bank and the best of what Texas did in a bullion depository, bring it to Florida, have Florida do it, and really secure us financially, because we really, really need to be secured financially to truly be secured. So again, those who know me well, that I really do dig deep. In my quest to find who's the best people in the world to help get this done, to do it right, not do it fast. Do it right, not do it fast. I also learned there's a lot of lobbyists out there that will help you get bills done, help you get things done, and they'll help you get things done to be good for their business or their industry. I want something that's good for the people, good for Floridians, and that's my goal. So that led me to the best person, the smartest person in my world, in the world, on the planet, as far as things financial go, which is Catherine Austin Fitts, which I'm very, very thrilled that she is here today. What I would like to do first is, before I get to introducing this most brilliant woman, is honor the dignitaries that did come. City Commissioner Bill Reed, City Commissioner Guy Lalonde is coming, thank you. And County Commissioner Neil Cumby is coming, will be there. And I would also like to send out a very, very special recognition and appreciation to Ash Jason, who is here, the Legislative and Cabinet Affairs Director from the Office of Financial Regulation for the state of Florida. Thank you very much. And Cassidy Bueller, oh, thank you, is the Regional Manager, Office of External Affairs, the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, Jimmy McCowness. Thank you very much for being here. And then we also have Madison is here from Representative Bankston's office, which is Bankston this is who did the bullion depository bill. So she's here to learn as well. Now, it is my great honor to introduce who I believe is one of the most well-informed minds on the planet around all things financial, Catherine Austin Fitts. Catherine is president of Solari Inc. and publisher of the Solari Report and managing member of Solari Investment Screens, LLC. Catherine served as managing director and member of the board of directors on the Wall Street investment bank, Dillon Reed Company, Inc., and as assistant secretary of housing and federal housing commissioner at the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development in the first Bush administration. Was also president of Hamilton Securities, Inc. Catherine has designed and closed over $25 billion worth of transactions and investment to date, and has led portfolio investment strategies for $300 billion of financial assets and liabilities. Catherine graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, BA, the Wharton School, MBA, and studied Mandarin Chinese at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. She blogs from Solari Court at solari.com, so you all need to go there. Catherine's expertise on Wall Street and Washington, D.C. are chronicled in Dylan Reed and the Aristocracy of Stock Profits, available in German, French, Spanish, and of course English. And her personal history investigating the money missing from the U.S. federal government. This is a quote from Catherine. Long ago, I made a promise that I would never act against the best interests or the excellence of my own people, that I would do my best to ensure that we were worthy of the stewardship of our world and that we did our best to leave a better world for generations yet to come. To make and keep such a promise is to understand that money and position are tools, not gold, and that death is not the worst thing that could happen. Some would probably accuse me of fighting the tape and not being good at the game. I would tell those people that now is not the time in the history of our people for a failure of imagination. And with that, please, a warm welcome to Catherine.
So when you get invited by this place, you discover that you never say no. I can't have to do it, but she's infectious, so
I don't feel like feed you well.
yeah. And Tim, where's Tim? He does great steak. Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here in this beautiful state. You know, I drove down, I was in Tennessee, and I was giving a speech in Alabama, and then drove up down, and I crossed the border, and I remembered it. That's why everybody wants to come to Florida. It's such a beautiful state. So I also wanted to introduce Elizabeth, where is Elizabeth? Okay, right back here. Elizabeth, so I've run two companies, and our team sat down last year, and we've been very concerned about centralization of economic and political resources. And we're always very interested in the decentralized economic and political control, so in a way this does do well. Because part of the problem with centralizing economic control is if you get behind how the money works on all of it, it's destroying so much more wealth than it's creation. And so we need to decentralize, but we need to do it in a way that makes, that builds wealth of the world. Is this the Sullivan?
Yeah, I'm Catherine. Mary says for Rican branch big people in Florida.
So anyway, so I've been very concerned about that. And at the end of last year, we said we need to get more aggressive about doing something. And we said, where is the jurisdiction in the world? I live in both Tennessee and the Netherlands. And our team at Solari is all around the world, and mostly Europe and the United States. And I said, how do we choose one jurisdiction where we could really see if we can get a breakthrough on protecting financial freedom, which of course, as you said, is intimately connected to this health and also for the freedom. So I said, where can we get real breakthroughs? And we looked at all the different places we've been working, and we said, okay, since I live in Tennessee and we have some wonderful legislators in Tennessee, some wonderful government officials, we said, let's go to Tennessee and see if we can help them really preserve and protect financial freedom. So we did, and Elizabeth Murphy has been representing us, did a wonderful job, the State House representing us, working with the legislators. And what we discovered, so we just did a sort of lessons learned, this legislature, the session is just ending now. One of the things we learned was that we were surprised. Many of the legislators were not aware that there was a problem, that we had a risk of much greater centralization coming in the next year or two. And one of the reasons that they didn't know that we were at risk of even more centralization and financial controls was the bankers and credit unions were appointing the bankers and credit unions did well. So it fell to me, Elizabeth, we said we need an elevator pitch to explain the problem. So we decided to put together a little presentation with three, sometimes 4 videos. I'm a great believer in short videos. I love short videos. And so we call it shorties. So I put together a presentation with 3 shorties and one that was 2.5 minutes that describes the problem. Now, let me tell you a little bit about these videos because I'm going to show them now. If you look at who's ultimately centralizing economic and political power, it's the central bankers. Okay? And the videos I'm going to show you are not somebody telling you that they're going to centralize control. It's the central bankers telling you what they're going to do. And that's the amazing thing about what's going on is they will tell you what they're going to do. So I'm going to show you these 4 videos, and I'm going to describe who it is and what it is, and then I'm going to show the video to the next one. So we'll go through 4 of them. Okay. So who here knows what the Bank of International Settlements in Basel is like? So one of us. Okay. So the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, is the central bank of the central banks. Okay. So they all, 63 of the top central banks in the world, radically re-engineer the financial system. I call it a financial theory. And the BIS, the nickname, is coordinating that plan. So they literally have, they're like the grand marshal of the plan, and they're coordinating the rollout of this centralization with all the different central banks, 63 of their members, but also many more. In the G20 meeting in September 2023, led by the India finance minister, so India was running the G20 meeting this year, everybody, the whole G20 pledged loyalty to the BIS rollout of what's called digital IDs and central bank digital currencies, which will us to big more of. Okay, so that's the BIS. The BIS is, think of the BIS as sort of the field marshal of central control. And Augustine Karsten, this is Augustine Karsten, CS, is the general manager of the Bank of International Settlements. He's from Mexico originally, so he's been about many years. And he was on a panel with the chairman of the Federal Reserve with some other central bankers in October of 2020. And you have to understand, I was raised to be a central banker. I never became one. I was asked to be one. I never became one. But I've listened to central bankers all my life. And this was the first time in my life that I ever heard a central banker tell the truth. And I almost fell off my chair. I was thinking, he doesn't they say that? So John Titus, who's my co-host so many markets, we were gobsmacked. And so I said, you've got to clip that. We've got to show that. Anyway, it's gone viral ever since. So this is 1 minute. This is Augustine Karsten's talking about central bank digital currency. It's called CBDCs, where you literally don't need a banking system. Everything can be done centrally from the central bank. And it's very centralizing. They call it a currency, but it's not a currency. It's a control system. Okay? So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But here is Augustine Karsten's in October 2020 talking about why he and central bankers love CBDCs. And what you won't see is Jay Powell was on the same panel, and you should have seen his face. He went, "When is the cheat?" And he's thinking, "Oh my God, Americans all still have guns. I wish you could show it." Here we go. Okay, let's play my honesty first.
Our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash, and there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
What he just said is during the lockdowns, if the governor said, no, we're not locking down to Florida, but the central bank had control of the rules and regulations of how and where you could use your money, they could lock you down centrally because your money wouldn't work if you left your home.
Think about the truckers in Canada.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So, and part of what we're talking about a central bank digital currency, but but don't assume that this is just has to be implemented by a CBDC. It can be implemented by an all digital financial system. You can implement it through the banking system. You can implement it through the credit card system. We're talking about an all digital system where you can centrally control the rules and regulations of how your money gets used. Okay, so let me turn to the next one. This is Bo Li, who used to work for the Bank of China, and then became a deputy managing director of the IMF. And this is him speaking last year, talking about the programmability of money, which means with AI and software, you can install very complex rules about when and how and where you can use your money. And as Karsten's made clear, they don't think it's your money, it's their expression of central bank liability. So here's Bo Li at the IMF in 2023.
The third way we think CBDC can improve financial inclusion is through what we call programmability. That is, CBDC can allow government agencies and private sector players to program, to create smart contracts, to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp. By programming CBDC, those money can be precisely targeted for what kind of people can own and what kind of use this money can be utilized. For example, for food. So this potential programmability can help government agencies to precisely target their support to those people who need support. So that way can also improve financial inclusion. Of course, I want to end with a caveat, because CBDC is not a panacea. CBDC cannot solve every challenge in financial inclusion. There are some aspects of financial inclusion is not related to technology. For example, financial literacy, digital literacy. So CBDC has to work with other policies together to try to improve financial inclusion. I stop here.
So I live in a very poor county in Tennessee. About 5% of the people in my county are not banked because they don't want to be banked. They like privacy. And I know them all because I go to the post office and we're all buying money orders together, right? So we talk. Anyway, so financial inclusion is being used to market the idea that we should be able to dictate the terms of your money. About 6 months ago, Splary published an amazing publication called Pharmafood about synthetic ins and insect flour and all the sort of bizarre things the pharmaceutical industry and the sort of biowarfare industry are doing to take control of the food supply. And I remember talking with a kind of wonderful reporter who investigated this before we worked on this on it. And I said, how in the world are they going to market this stuff? Nobody wants it. And it's phenomenal. They expect it. And then I saw Bo Li and I said, oh, there's the marketing plan. You know, you're going to have to eat synthetic meat. Okay, so let's turn to the next one. This is, we have two more. This is Richard Porter, and this is the toughest one to watch. This is 2.5 minutes. Has anybody here seen it? Yes, somebody's seen it, okay. So Richard Porter, in my opinion, is the top scholar in the world on central banking and banking. We have several interviews with him on the Solera report. We put them up on YouTube. I think he understands economies and how to build wealth and prosperity better than any scholar in the world. If you look at his resume, it's impeccable. PhD from Oxford, absolutely great. He's German, but he sounds like but he's German. And he, I was asked by the legislature, some of the leaders in Tennessee, to have a study written on why a sovereign state bank would be good and why it could help protect us from this kind of central control. And so I said, well, the top guy in the room is Richard Porter. I don't know if I could get him or not, but we got him. And he wrote one for Tennessee. But if you read it, there's tremendous information that applies to every state in the United States. Anyway, so Richard and I were in Malmö, Sweden in 2022. This is May of 2022. And he had just had a meeting with the top central banker of Europe, and he told the story of what that gentleman told them. And I assure you, Richard is an impeccable source. If the central banker told him this, it's true. Okay, Mike?
It's possible that even if you have to have CBDC in some form, that you're not destroying the banking system if you do it the way China is doing it. Now, you have to remember, China only recently introduced their banking system, and it seems they were not willing to already give it up. They have already CBDC. It's still a pilot project, but it's introduced, among millions of people already. But it was introduced on purpose in such a way that it would not harm the banking system, and therefore is a more truthful sort of update of the old paper money. But of course, it still has the control aspect. So at least it's not killing the banking system. The way they do this is by requiring you to have a bank account in order to get CBDC. So it's not a direct account at the central bank. It's only through your bank that you can get it. You see how simple that is, and of course could be done over here, but they're not discussing it in say the ECB is not discussing it because you see their agenda is to get rid of banks. But this alternative exists. But then, of course, the key problem is this control aspect, which at the moment they haven't stepped up in China, but that can be introduced any time. And that, of course, is a concern. Also, they never talk about the nature of this CBDC. What is it actually going to look like? They never talk about that. Right. But I heard one European central banker tell me what it's going to look like. He saw it. He was invited to one of the old central banks in Europe that are very much promoting this. And they showed him. And, he's a top, executive director of another central bank in Europe. And there's no reason to believe that he was telling me a story. And he was around this large and would be implanted under your skin. So that is the plan.
Right.
And of course, that has other implications on top of what we've mentioned, on top of the control aspects, because that actually enters your body, in my view, violates human dignity, and can be then used for, even in terms of functionality, beyond the monetary and economic transaction purposes. So highly dangerous and definitely something we have to oppose. And so using cash is one of the things we can do to make sure that the hurdle will be higher for the central planners to introduce the CBDC.
So Richard was just in Nashville and Knoxville over Europe and briefing the legislators on many of the different ideas of what we could do to change this. I want to remind everybody, part of our power as states is under the Constitution, the power is not delegated to the federal government, power reserved to the states. And that's one of the reasons we chose Tennessee, not one of the countries in Europe that's trying to stop this, because that gives us extraordinary powers that we exercise. That's number one. But number two, remember, our system has always been a balance of power between the bankers and the people's representatives. So the monetary side of the house has been run by the bankers, but the fiscal side of the house has been run by the people's representatives, the legislature. And when you come to understand what they're doing with the digital ID and central bank digital currency, or that kind of financial transaction control in an all-digital system, is they can literally replace all of the fiscal decisions, controls, laws, regulations through the monetary side. So you can literally get rid of the legislature if you wanted to. You can literally get rid of most of the executive branch if you want to, because you can embed all the rules and regulations in the software and run them centrally in an all-digital system. That's what Karsten's, in effect, was done. So we're talking about something that can end both state and individual sovereignty. And so our goal, it's what we've been working on a year, is to protect sovereignty. We want state sovereignty, we want local sovereignty, because that will protect individual sovereignty. But if you look at this technology in an all-digital system, it can be used essentially to wipe out sovereignty. Okay, so let's go to the final one. This is my all-time favorite. And this is always the one the legislators like the best. Okay, so the Federal Reserve System, which is the U.S. central bank, it has a board of governors in Washington, but there are 12 individual banks around the country that run our financial transaction trading track. So that mother load of that system is the New York Fed, which is the depository for the U.S. government, and runs the primary dealer, does a whole lot of different things. And then it's owned by its member banks who also are agent and do a lot of the functions for the federal government. And sometimes when I recommend a state bank to a state where the government's not allowed to own a state bank, I said, look, you just need a New York Fed for Florida. You need, because the banks in the state could also own it and provide the depository services. Okay. So this gentleman is a gentleman named Neil Kashkari, and Neil Kashkari was a Treasury official at the U.S. Treasury when they gave away $27 trillion bailout money. So I don't know if you remember that, but $27 trillion of bailout money went out when $8 trillion would have paid off all the single-family mortgages in the country, which will give you a sense of how much 27 trillion was more than 3 times all the single-family mortgages in the country. So that's Neil Kashkari. So clearly he has impeccable establishment credentials. And he's the president of the Minneapolis Fed. So this is Neil Kashkari giving a speech at Columbia University last year as the president of the Minneapolis Fed, one of the 12 Fed bank presidents, telling you what he thinks of central bank digital currency. Okay, Mike?
Which I'm pretty skeptical. I keep asking anybody at the Fed or outside of the Fed to explain to me what problem this is solving. I can send anybody in this room $5 with Venmo right now. Right? No, seriously. So what is it that a CBDC could do that Venmo can't do? And all I get is a bunch of hand waving. I get well, maybe it's better for financial inclusion. Maybe it's better for cross-border remittances. Maybe. Is there any evidence that it is? And, they say, well, what about China? China is doing it. Well, I can see why China would do it. If they want to monitor every one of your transactions, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. If you want to impose negative interest rates, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. And if you want to directly tax customer accounts, you could do that with the central bank digital currency. You can't do that with Venmo. So I get why China would be interested. Why would the American people be for that?
President Fed banks warranty we shouldn't do it. It's quite extraordinary. And because the Fed is in partnership with the BIS, they have a whole partnership on implementing CBDCs and digital IDs, and it's quite controversial among the research. And how it's about 2 months ago, Powell came out in testimony and said, "Oh, we're completely that where a CBDC, a real CBDC, is so remote. We're not remotely switched to rolling in a CBDC." And so we all jumped on the internet, published articles about, and they just put out scopes of work to hire people to implement the CBDC. So it's not that remote. If you're paying somebody $200,000 a year, it's not that remote.
I want to say something here. Just thankfully, we have the governor that we do have, and he is ahead of the game on a lot of steps and what he's trying to do. My understanding is stop things at a state level before they get to the city, county, whatever level. And one of the things he did last year, I think it was, is sign in Florida, CBDC is not considered legal tender, which is fabulous. I think that in the grand scheme of things is a speed bump. I don't think it's a full stop.
Right, but when he came out and gave a press conference, and I forget when it was, but it was
March last. I think it was about March.
Yes, and it was very significant because it broke the ice about someone like our team getting something done at the legislatures, because suddenly it was an acceptable conversation to have. He really broke the ice, and it made a huge difference. And that was an example of just bringing transparency before he passed the legislation.
And that's one of the things that really prompted me as a citizen. Is I went up there and they're like, "Well, who are you and who are you with?" I'm like, "America, I'm a citizen, just confirmed citizen." That's very nice. So I'm like, I'm as you know, I'm adamant. I'm polite and all that. However, I want to get things done. And the other thing I realized, having run for an office, people that run for office and are representatives or senators, they're regular normal people. They're not people that are like PhDs in every single issue that comes up. So I look at my job, my self-appointed job, is to help educate these people on the finances, on the things financial, give them reports. You have to be their version of Cliff Notes, if you will, to help try to do that. So that's what I'm trying to do, is learn as deep a dive as I can to bring up to the people that I know up in Tallahassee to help get this done, because it's like they're building a room around us and 3 walls are built and they're working on the 4th wall. And I can guarantee 100% of you have worked hard for your money. You want to spend it where you want, on who you want, do with what you want with it, without somebody telling you, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that. Another thing that the CBDC, I want you to think about this for a second. When they give you, or if it goes into effect, and they're like, okay, so here we're trading you your dollars for CBDC, and you have to use it or lose it. Do you know why there's an expiration date on it? I want you to think about this, because then you have no savings. Think about your life if you had no savings.
So let me bring up 3 things about this situation. And I know that it's hard for people who've enjoyed liberty their whole life to fathom, and anybody would really want to do this. One of my favorite articles so far this year is someone called Wake Up Call by James Kunstler, when he said all political divides in America have come down to the sane versus the insane. And the same about how with the insane. And, we don't attribute to them, we don't call them communists anymore, because it pays them way too much respect to think that they have ideology. So I know it's hard to fathom, but one of the things Cash Carey said that I want to point out to you is he talked about taxation. Because this means that you can take taxes directly out of people's accounts. So part of compromising sovereignty is, I want to raise your taxes, I just take it. But there's something else. When the World Economic Forum says it's 2030 and you have no assets, I can take it. Now, I have wonderful friends who have fought hard to stop healthcare mandates. Here's the reality. If they get financial transaction control, they can dictate not just financial policies. They can dictate all health policies, all food policies, all policies. Okay? And the critical issue that this comes down to is, here in Florida, can someone in Basel, Switzerland, Washington, or Wall Street stop you and your banker and your state and local government from transacting with each other by controlling the systems? Or can you do it independently, ideally with something better than Employee Express? Okay. And that's what it comes down to. Now, one of the things we've been working on, and we have a lot of materials on the website, is, well, what can we do? There's a huge amount that states can do, particularly if your state legislators and your governor has the support of the citizens and the support of the bankers. The bankers are critical to this. One of the reasons your economy is healthy is you have lots of banks. The more banks loan and do productive loans, the stronger the economy is. You don't want that banking system to get consolidated. That's part of this process.
And across the nation, the average percentage that states are losing community banks is 2% a year. Florida is losing 4% of our community banks a year.
Right.
Community banks care about the community. The big banks don't.
Right. And what's interesting, if you listen to Richard Morgan, what he will explain is the more community banks you have, the better, because they're making productive loans which don't create inflation. It's the asset bubbles that create inflation. And, it's the community banks close to the communities that are building up small business and enterprise, which is part of that wealth building. And part of the problem was the pandemic was it shut down one books. Now, one thing everybody can do, I'll tell you what my favorite bill, but we didn't get it in Tennessee, but we tried. My favorite bill this year was all cash purchases for $500 or less, no sales tax. First of all, it gives real relief to poor families struggling with inflation. But the other thing is it keeps cash alive in a way that's positive, as opposed to mandated. And so it's one of the things we've been talking about. I love that one.
Yes, I love that one too. And I was like, okay, if 500 is too much, then let's do 350. Whatever the number is, going $350 or less, cash payments, tax-free. Because it's like I go to a store and they don't take cash. I'm big on cash. And it's like, it's such a pain. You can't go to the ballpark and buy a hot dog. And what people don't realize is 4% of our population are either unbanked or underbanked. So instantly what you do when you have a place that doesn't take cash, you disenfranchise Blacks, Hispanics, the disabled, and the elderly. I have a sister-in-law that has a disability and there's no way to give her a credit card because it's kind of like, okay, here's your cash, you can buy this much. If we had a bill like this, for instance, if this shop sold t-shirts, they didn't take cash. This shop sold t-shirts, they took cash. Where are you going to go? So it's going to prompt this store then to start accepting cash. You want more cash in circulation, the harder it is to implement any kind of digital controls.
So, so one thing you can do is do everything you can do to preserve cash. And we don't need the government to do that. We can do that. Because if you look at a lot of our financial statements, we're financing the bad guys. And so the issue is how do we change them? Another way we can change that is by doing something about taxes. The federal government is in massive violation of the financial management laws and has been for 20 years. We have a big thing we studied on taxes and different things we could do about that. And I won't get into that. It's a complicated subject, but for anybody who's interested, we brought companies. Now, the more people looking into how we turn around the taxes, because it's not. Never forget, I went to see one of the senators who ran the agency, or ran the budget for, or the appropriations for FUD and the Treasury and many of the other different agencies. He had the big appropriations, and I went to see his chief of staff, and they said, "What do you think is going on at FUD?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you think is going on?" And I didn't know them. I was trying to be, discreet. And they looked me dead in the eye and said, "How does being run as a criminal enterprise?" And I said, "I need to disagree because." And what I don't think they realized was how it's run by the Department of Treasury, the New York Fed, and its member banks, and the Department of Justice. So, and they can't. No, but that's how you get $27 trillion of bailouts when $8 trillion would pay off all the mortgages of the country. When I was the FHA commissioner, I used to find properties, and I found one property in Chicago where they had originated and defaulted on the mortgage 5 times in 1 year on one property. And I used to take the inventories of foreclosed properties, and I would fly to the Dallas office, and I'd go out and look at this lot and said we had 10 foreclosed totals of the lot. It's empty. Mm-hmm. So that's how you get those kind of situations. Anyway,
when you talk about the taxation, we spoke about this a little bit last night. You were saying how the states can take back, because the states really have the power. Needless to say, everybody here knows this federal overreach. The states have the power. We need to take back.
So let me come back to that, but let me just say the most important thing the state needs, the banks, and the residents need is to be able to transact directly with each other within the state and within Florida jurisdiction without anyone from Washington to Wall Street or Basel, Switzerland to be able to operationally stop people from doing. You want financial and currency liquidity within the state. I remember one story, and I'm trying to find this citation. The new government came into Greece in 2012, having promised as a campaign that they would deal with austerity and stopping austerity. And what they discovered was their taxes were collected by corporate payment systems run by corporations that were loyal to the ECB and the German banks, and they couldn't get control of their own tax. Okay? So you don't want to be financially controlled and transactionally controlled by somebody outside the state. You want that independent liquidity, and that is essential to having a sovereign government, or citizens who enjoy individual sovereignty. So one of that, and that's the issue of having a state bank, but that's not enough. You also need to make sure you have the operational capacity. So you said the law setting outline CBDC, great idea. But you also need the operational transaction capacity so that you can continue to transact if they insist. Okay.
Is that where we would have to have a sovereign state bank or state?
You don't have to have a sovereign state bank. I believe you need the state to have a depository function within the state that it controls. Okay. It doesn't have to be state-owned. There are many different ways to do it. But you also have to create the operational capacity so that you can continue to transact. Yes, you can always do checks through an open clearing system, cash works, and there's always Coin Express or, you know, driving things around. But
We have Gator Express.
take you what?
Gator Express.
Gator Express, okay. But we want something a little bit more, you know, we need very healthy digital systems that are under state jurisdiction and under state law. And that's a complicated task, and that's why it's so important the governor, the state legislature could work on that, because so we have a great memo on the Solia report. You can find it on the homepage. And the revenue officer in Tennessee asked us to write it. He said, could you write us a memo on what is financial transaction freedom? What threatens it? Because it's not just, you know, central control. It's also, you know, disaster. You know, in Kentucky, when they shut the power down for 3 weeks, you know, and I remember when there was a cyclone in New Zealand, the governor of the Central Bank of New Zealand stood up and said, thank heavens we still had cash, otherwise we would have been toast as a result of the cyclone. And I said to my co-host, I don't think he got the memo here, you know. Anyway, but so check that memo out, because it shows you many of the things you can do. But you need that independent banking and transaction capability so that you can't be shut down by anybody outside the jurisdiction of the state of Florida. The second thing I believe you need, is a bullion depository. In the memo, we list 10 or 20 other ideas. There are many other things you can do, but you need the fundamental trade routes, not just for the state, but for the citizens as well. I can't tell you how many citizens of Tennessee had a bullion depository, and instead of going to Treasury Direct, they could go to Tennessee Direct and buy bonds directly from, you know, if they could put their money with the state instead of with Wall Street, you would hear a giant sucking citadel of New York.
And in Florida, Rev Bankston did last year do a bullion depository bill. And this is one that, again, Rev Bankston is super great, wonderful, nice guy. This is not his forte. So he was trusted people that came in and said, oh, we can help do this. The bill that they came up with had way too much in it. And as I say, we need to do it right as opposed to doing it fast. So
we published an article, a sort of a study on how to do certain the key issues for a state bullion depository, and I think you printed some out. So
Yes.
there as well.
Yeah.
Okay, should I go back to taxation, or should we take Q&A first?
Would you like to do some Q&A first? Yeah, anybody got questions here? Do you not understand thing? Are you following?
Ooh, some. Have you maintained your state of amusement?
So you're all still with us?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Right.
Yeah. So, Maria Mahoy, I understand that CBDC with similar system is already implemented in China, where they are actually able to curtail and to prevent people from spending their money for this Cambodia. So you say it may or may not happen in the US, start trading it would. We've talked about personally, what about the impact on corporations? Is there any discussion about the business side of that money?
So that's an excellent question. What you've been watching as different. So first of all, I would say the CBDC in China is still in prototype form. What China has done is rolled out a social credit system, which is very invasive and more controlling, and that's part of all of this. And as I said, we don't need a CBDC to do total digital financial control. I can do it with credit cards and bank accounts and other things. So, just trying to think. Well, but tell me. Oh, yeah. So what has been happening as independent income has been ratcheted down, and I would say it's very engineered, just wiping out. So let me give you an example. In the pandemic, you have 6 small businesses in a shopping mall that are shut down. Costco's open next door because the virus is dangerous in the small business, but if it's a publicly traded stock, there's no probable virus there. And so we saw a tremendous number. Basically, the Federal Reserve, as part of a plan voted on by the central bankers in 2019, August 2019, voted on the going direct reset. As a result, they injected $5 trillion into the economy. And I'm going to grossly oversimplify. The $5 trillion goes to Wall Street, and then you shut down Main Street. And one of the reasons you don't get immediate hard inflation is it's very deflationary to shut down all those small businesses. But by shutting down all those small businesses, what it means is the publicly traded stocks can stuff huge market share out of Main Street. And they have enough money to also go in and pick up their real estate cheap, right? So it's a game of disaster capitalism. It's got nothing to do with health. And it's when so by that process, you shut down independent income and you centralize control. And as you do that, you get a higher and higher percent of the general population dependent on government subsidies. Okay. So now everybody is getting their Social Security check, or they're getting their Social Security disability, or they're getting their military pension, or they're getting, the pandemic relief, but they're getting government subsidy, and more rules relate to how they can and where they can spend that money. And what you're finding is the corporations are becoming more and more dependent. So if you look at Walmart's income, they're highly dependent on subsidy payments from the government coming into the consumer's pocket. Okay, so you're watching the government pick up the income and doing it steadily in a way that makes the population more and more dependent. And here's a fundamental political issue before all of us, if we're going to be successful. I was just out with the legislator of one of the Western states, wonderful people, very deeply committed to freedoms. And one of the legislators said, every year we send $1 to Washington and we get $1.19 back. And our constituents want that money. And we're getting bought with our own money. In fact, if you look at how much money is coming out of the pension funds, going into Treasury, then disappearing out of the back door because they're managing the money illegally. We're sending a lot more to $1. But what we're facing is, if we were free to just keep that dollar and spend it without federal laws, rules, and terms and conditions, even if we could just keep 50 cents, we would be far more prosperous, because the terms and conditions that come with that $1.19 and that extra 19 cents are phenomenal. We had a group of Republican legislators this year worked very hard to figure out how they could say no to federal education aid, because basically, and I'm going to be a tough guy, federal education aid requires you to teach your children how to be sex slaves. That's ridiculous. And so we should be good conservatives should be able to say no to that money. But the reality is they couldn't figure out how to do it because everybody's on it's financial methadone, and we're addicted. And that's what we're going to have to do, because we have to decide, do we want to obey the state and federal constitution, or do we want the central bank credit money? And that's what we're going to have to figure out. And there are many ways to solve that problem, but it takes organization and real political commitment. It takes the bankers, it takes the legislators, it takes the governor's office, it takes all of us. And that begins with, something we have a trust. And that risk, and if you look at the risk that the central bankers are telling you what they're going to do, that is a tray. It's like a bullet coming straight for our head. And what I have to tell you is, if you look at what they have planned for us, because people say to me, why are you so public and verbal fight against this? And I say, I'm not living in that world. So I have nothing to lose. I'm not living there. I won't go there. So, if I go with their program, I have zero chance. If I fight, I've got some chance. Whatever that is, it's better than zero.
Yes.
Don Barons with I Am Laban. The CBDC, I have my mortgage, VA loan at the federal level, the student loans are all in the US dollar. If it switches to the CBDC, do the entitlements go away, or are they trying to transfer to the CBDC? What would happen to the entitlements and the loans, the debt?
It's an excellent question, and it depends on how they do it. So, we could wake up on one day and they could say, okay, we're switching to CBDC. Everybody has to have CBDC, and all you have to swap your dollars for CBDC. So in theory, that could happen. Now, Chairman Powell has said that he wants to authorize the legislation before he would roll out a CBDC. And then he kind of walks the bonnet and he's reaffirmed, okay, we need legislation. I don't think he can get that legislation, certainly not before the election. But if you look at what they're doing inside the Fed to build the capacity to do it, and if you look at what they're doing with digital systems, credit cards, fast payment systems, and other ways of implementing the same control, I don't know if you watch former people getting thrown out of banks or having their payment systems pulled, or, all of that control is increasing. So it is impossible to tell how they would plan to roll it out. And of course, will they do a wholesale one as China did, or will they do a direct one where they do direct retail? They've indicated they will do a wholesale one. But
They would
look at how
that's
what?
they would forgive the debt. They would somehow transfer the debt off the national debt.
So remember that, part of this is they could do a different system domestically than they maintain internationally. They could delink the dollar system continued to do. And again, this is not a currency, it's a control grid. So this is designed to dramatically reduce the subsidy they need to spend on the population to buy their political support. So anything could happen. It's one reason. So 2 years ago, I paid off my mortgage. I only had a little bit left, but I paid off my mortgage and said, I don't want to get caught in the debt trap. So let me give you an example. If you look at the people who are trying to stop the WHO Treaty, and I will tell you, the WHO Treaty is the most elegant economic taking machine I've ever seen. It's frightening. The WHO World Health Organization, and it's basically, we could talk about the WHO machinery if you want, but it's a frightening taking machine. I have a very dear friend, Dr. Meryl Nass, who has been the leader in going around the world talking to global leaders, trying to get them to not vote to approve the new treaty. And what they all tell her is, but if we don't, we know it's terrible and we don't want to agree to it, but if we don't agree to it, the bankers to pull our bonds. So they're in a debt trap. And so if you personally are in a debt trap, anything you can do to get out of the debt trap is wonderful. Bud Halsey is a wonderful representative from Eastern Tennessee. Has been putting in bills. He put in a bill that would allow you to pay your property taxes forward, so that you paid off your debt and your property tax paid off forward. And they couldn't get you on a land grab. They couldn't put you on a distracto. It's one of the things coming.
I think one of the things that also, because in one of my creative ideas is in Florida to, first of all, declare gold and silver as legal tender, and along with that, so that it can be used to pay off taxes and whatnot. So if you do have gold and silver, then instead of them grabbing you by the throat, you can at least pay off your taxes. That's one of the many. So Kim had a question.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the controls. BRICS is out there now. They're trying to create their own monetary system to the U.S. dollar, and there's a lot of countries in Africa who have run away from the U.S. dollar.
Right.
So would you say that BRICS is kind of counter what this goal is trying to do?
So it's very interesting because the BRIC countries have pledged allegiance to the BIS central control. Okay. And through the G20, not through the BRICS. And it is true. Does everybody here know who the BRICS nations are? They're sort of the top growing countries in the emerging markets. And so the BRIC nations are trying to build much more resiliency, so they're not going through the Anglo-American controlled systems. So I was in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, and you walk up to buy something in the airport, and there are two credit card machines, one for the Chinese system and one for the Western system. And that's because they don't want their data going into Visa and MasterCard. So part of this is about surveillance and data. So part of this is a data war. Nicholas Necker-Ponyway ran the MIT Media Lab. So in the digital age, data about money is worth more than money. So part of this is about the surveillance and privacy issue. And the BRICS are trying to do more and more because they don't want to be skimmed by the Anglo-American alliance. So they are trying to assert independence. But if you look at what they're doing with central bank digital currency and biometrics and the digital ID, they want Chinese to control that control grid. but they're on board for the control grid. And so that's why America is so important, because if there's any country in the world that can push back against this, other than countries that are not online. So I think when the pandemic started, 67% of the Mexican population was not on the internet. So a lot of people went to Mexico because it was quite wonderful. I don't know if you said, there's this great video of a bodybuilder in Mexico who come down from Canada. And he said, the thing I love about Mexico is, he said, the drug cartels in Canada mandate that you have to use their product. But here in Mexico, the drug cartels don't mandate that we have to take their product. Well, so Mexico is rare. Let's do it.
So what's your take on regular decentralized cryptocurrencies? What is their role? Do you think they're being controlled now that they're matured a little bit?
Do you think Bitcoin?
Like Bitcoin and all the other lesser assets that are growing and use cases and stuff.
So I believe in a perfect world, and I have a ton of information that's later. If you want to go and do a deep dive, that's what I've said about crypto. I believe that in a perfect world, we would have private currencies, and the private currencies would be good, and they could be digital or analog. My big push is we cannot afford an all digital system. So I'm out there pushing cash much more than crypto, because, if we go to all digital, no matter, if you have the current governance system, if you have a secret government system combined with an all digital system, whether it's crypto or the dollar or whatever, we're tough. So my focus is getting the balance to hell on. So unfortunately, I believe if you look at the history of crypto and how it's been developed, there are two things that are important to understand. The minute they want to control it or shut it down, they kind of like that. And that's very hard for many people in the crypto space to believe or understand. The second thing is that I think they've used a lot of the crypto community to help them figure out how to build their control groups. And, the people in that space don't mean that, and they don't believe that that's true. I've spent a lot of time looking at how the feds can control any city deficit, and how they assert control when they want to, whether it's regulatory or through enforcement. They're ultimately going to control, and they use that space for bright things. And I'll just tell you one story. I was on my way in 2017 to the Aspen Institute for a crypto conference, and it was a lovely group of people. And right before I had meetings in Zurich, and I was over in Basel, and I had to go to Zurich, and then I was going to fly home after the meetings. So I drive right by the BIS. It's this huge iron looking, it looks like the Iron Boot in Basel, Switzerland. I drive right by the BIS. This is 2017. I walk into the Swiss railway station to find my ticket. I walk up to the machine, and it offers me an opportunity to buy my ticket with Bitcoin, 2017. And it offers me a chance to top up my Bitcoin wallet from Swiss Railway. So I can pay with Bitcoin, but I can also buy it from them. And I'm like right next door in the BIS. And I said, whatever this is, it's not a grassroots phenomenon. Anyway, so now what I would love to see, here's my dream, okay? My dream is two things: that we get the crypto community integrated with communities, with the food freedom and the health freedom, but understand the power of decentralization by community. And here's the second thing. If you've never heard Bill Binney's one of my favorite people in the world. He was the top technical director of the NSA. And when he figured out what they were up to with central control, he left, retired, and, has told all. But I said to him, okay, Bill, give me a list of things we can do to really change this. And he said, and you really have to, when I did my due diligence on Bitcoin, I spent 100 hours doing due diligence to the whole thing. And then I got all my questions. And then I flew to Baltimore and had Bill come to one of those shantytown diners to ask all the real questions. And we spent all afternoon. And that's how I figured out sort of what I thought of crypto. And you can go to Solera and get it open. I said, okay, how do we really fix this, Bill? And Bill said, okay, here's what you have to do. He said, you got to get the homeschoolers to teach all their kids about cryptography and encryption. And then if you do local crypto and you keep changing the crypto, the encryption systems, the kids just make a new one every week, and you just keep, churning it around. You said, "Well, drive them crazy, then we'll be able to handle it." So that's what you want to do. You want to build digital systems where we control and we can create the conditions of privacy, not just because, we have the technology to do it, but we have the community engaged in doing it. So one of the things you'll find is throughout history, apparently that revolutions that are most successful are civil disobedience revolutions. And they're successful because they're so inclusive. Sometimes it takes strong young people to be, to lead a violent revolution, but all of us can get into civil disobedience. And if we can get the crypto community really relating to building privacy and freedom locally, and then networking, that would help the revolution tremendously. And that will get us back to taxation as well. So I think there's an incredible opportunity, but it would help if the crypto community could stop, could understand the extent to which they are being played and used.
I think, like you said before, they're being subsidized as well.
Yes.
A lot of the brighter minds are being encouraged and bought off.
Right. There's a pump and dump going on. And it's a much, I have a lot of material that's lawyer. I think it's fine. And McCall and I had a 3-hour interview about this. So we did a mega deep dive on crypto about a year or so ago. More questions?
So I have a question about cash. If the Fed could just keep printing endless cash, then if you look at what a dollar's worth in 1913, 1933 versus what it's today, clearly if you had a certain amount of gold, you could buy a home in 1913.
Right.
You could still buy the same home with gold today. A dollar won't get you anywhere near that. So if they make the dollar worthless, I guess I'm not saying what's the point with cash, because I believe in cash, but what if they make cash go down to zero? What happens then?
So they're, basically we're close.
Okay. That's why I asked.
Headed down. So that's why it would be wonderful where you can build enough political organization to have the private currencies, to have the bullion. And that's why I think it's essential that states have bullion depositories. The reason I don't want to get dependent on bullion depositories right now is as follows. If you study sort of control and political control globally, we've seen community after community worldwide be put to a shock deflation, and then people do the land grab. And they go for the businesses of the land. Okay, now here's how you play land grab in Florida. What percentage of the population has precious metals? Owns precious metals, would you guess? 5%? Let's just say 5%. Okay, and how much precious metals does the state have? Is it
9.
Okay. Now, the Constitution allows states to do gold and silver, which is one of the reasons we're encouraged to do gold and silver. How much gold and silver do the central bankers have? A lot, right? They've got that market cornered, right? So if we depend to transact on gold and silver, and they have all the gold and silver, and we hardly have any, they can put us in a short squeeze. Okay. So that's why we want to make sure by building up independent income, by building up local banking, by building up, real assets in many different forms, they can't put us in a short squeeze. If we could do private currencies, that would be wonderful too. At the height of the Great Depression, there were 3,100 community currencies in America, and the 3,100 counties in America. So it's an average of one private currency per county. Of course, that's not unrelated to why the Feds did the work, the work programs, poured tsunami of money that destroyed all the local currencies.
Yes.
I find that generally in the U.S., the children, the students, way by the time you have a young person start their lives, by and large, they are totally ignorant about financial matters, the matters of money, the understanding that cash versus the travel, the money, the information, the education, the knowledge, the skills, 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 the skills credit. I'm not, from here. So I saw that coming into the US, exact. This country is around the mentality or relying on buy now, pay later, as opposed to save, then buy when you have the. That has huge implications, inside of your opinion, help or state if you are either ignorance or, probably. How do we change that?
Well, one of the other things that our wonderful governor did is now it's required that they take academics. So, and one of the things, and again, this is where all of us can do something. Kim mentors students, I mentor students, and I talk to them about, it is like this, I talk to them about, did you know if you bought something for $100 on a credit card, you end up paying, $150. And I talk to my students about different things like that, things that they're not going to get at school and not going to get at home. I'm mentoring 5, you're mentoring 6. So it's 13 right now, however that'll grow. So that's something, it's like, what can we all do? A, use cash, always use cash. And of course, I'm up there pounding on doors, bothering people in Tallahassee to try to get these things done. And what I look at my self-imposed jobs moving forward, and this is why I wanted all of you all here, is because I plan on going around as many places as I can, educating people on what's going on. Because again, if we don't have our financial freedoms, we don't have any freedoms. And so that's what one of the things that we're trying.
I want to give you a little factoid on children that I might when I was a financial advisor. Well, 2 things. One is, if you want your children to be great with money, to teach them math. Don't worry about teaching them about money. Teach them to be absolutely great at math by the time they're 12, 13, 14, 15. And then they can tell that this is double this. So math is the foundation. That's number one. I'll tell you another thing I discovered, and this was very interesting. So I was an investment advisor for 10 years. One of the things I do a lot, big people clean up for financial fraud. So I helped a lot of people clean up for Madoff, some of the big financial frauds. So what I discovered is you can trick a man and you can trick a woman, but it is almost impossible to trick a man and woman working together. And that's why the divide and conquer thing is so devastating. And that's why when it comes to political organization, we have to beat the divide and conquer thing, because if we get together, they're much more powerful, and we get that shared intelligence thing going.
Because also, if you think about it, between all the World Health Organization, all the IMF, all of this, those are thousands of people. We're millions of people. And if you just, again, do the math, we can do this. It's I think some people get so polarized, and there's a lot of knee-jerk trash talks, there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions, and it's more about sometimes who gets it done rather than that it gets done. And in my world, it's like if a lot of these things I've been throwing up there get done, great. Me and like my husband and a few other people will know that, hey, I'm the one that did that. Nobody else is going to know. But I'm like, I don't care. As long as it gets done, it's not about who gets it done.
And it works. We've got one in the back.
There's several, but I'll just swap one out real quick, or a couple. Go this side.
Same.
Everybody here?
Yeah.
Get it some crazy.
That was clear. That.
Now I know what American Idol was. In the control currency and the national debt is in dollars, so has that conversation been discussed as to not just our national debt, but other countries' national debts? If they adopt this control, how does that wipe out the dollar debt?
So it doesn't necessarily wipe out the dollar. What it does is it's a control system, and it gives the leadership the ability, one, to take our assets, so to deal with the debt, and to increase our taxes, but to radically reduce our footprint. So we can be reduced to living at a much lower level of consumption if we're in a complete control system. So it enables a reset whereby wealth is concentrated in a few and everybody else is reduced in terms of their power within the economy or their what assets they have or what income they have. So you can radically extract subsidy from the population.
Okay. One other one I had question was on the exchange from the control system from with the dollar. Is it a 1-for-1? Which I with the they're going to get cut something. They're going to get a greater percentage of that exchange.
Well, so generally when they do these kinds of exchanges, my guess, and I'm just guessing at what I would do if I was in their shoes, I would do a dollar for dollar and then just keep inflating radically.
Right.
So inflation always sells better than discounts.
Yeah.
So if I give you $1 and then inflate you away in a year, so let's say I give you $1, I reduce your value 75 cents within a year, and then I give you 10 cents as a rebate before the election. You love me because I gave you 10 cents.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you threw it. I love you all day. Lastly, regarding as I'm hearing what you're saying regarding the control, the centered more around transaction. Would that be accurate? Controlling the transactions.
Controlling the transactions, but if you look at how the transaction control dovetails with food and health freedom, what they want to do is control you physically. So they're talking about implementing a control where they control physically where you go, what you do, how much energy they have. They're looking for complete physical control, through this mechanism.
Well, that was a precursor. The nucleus of the question was around savings. Because 60% of our population of retirees are under retirement. How are they addressing the savings component of not just us retirees and approaching that, but the younger kids?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question holistically. So in 1995, there was a budget squabble, and the government shut down for 3 weeks. And when the budget squabble was over, one of the top pension fund leaders in the country told me they've given up on the country. They're moving the money in the store. Fall. And that fall was fiscal 1998, so it was October 1st, 1997. And a process began, like more than you want to know about this, it's hilarious. Missingmoney.solarian.com. The process began where $21 trillion disappeared from the U.S. government.
Why?
Okay. So it started by 9/11. There was 4.3 trillion missing from the U.S. government, and in fact, Rumsfeld stood up the day before 9/11 at the press conference and he said there's 2.3 trillion missing from the U.S. government. We thought it was a modified hangout because we had a big story coming out that Friday about the 4+ trillion. And of course, nobody cared about that story because I love pound. But in 2015, I counted 12 trillion missing by 2015. 2015, essentially the last full year of Obama, 6.5 trillion went missing from mostly from the Army. It was DOD and HUD, the two agencies where it kept disappearing. And it was such an amazing amount of money. I was on various radio shows, and a professor who's a budget expert from Michigan State University, Dr. Mark Skidmore, heard me, and he said, she has to be wrong. There's no way the Army could be missing many months of the fire budget for the year. So he went to the financial statements at DOD and discovered I was right. And so he called me and he said, what can I do to help? And I said, well, you can do a complete survey of DOD and HUD for all the years from 1998 on and see how much is totally missing. Because I've never surveyed I haven't done a very thorough survey. So he got a bunch of his graduate students, they did, and he ran it up to 21 trillion. Okay. That's $65,000 per person for every person on this audience. Okay. And at the time he said, now you've been basically promoting and trying to bring transparency into this theft out the back door. And because here's how it works. Our pension fund by treasuries, when he published his study showing that 21 trillion was missing, guess what the outstanding treasury bills and bonds in the country were? 21 trillion. Which means our pension funds buy $1 trillion of bonds, and then the money goes into Treasury, and then it disappears out of the back door.
Yeah.
And so now we have an IOU from ourselves without those assets being present in the government. So Skipper said to me in 2017, realizing there's 21 trillion missing and there's 21 trillion outstanding debts, the collateral has left the station. And he said, why have you stuck with this story year after year after year? And I said, because this is about the U.S. retirement systems. So we've been promising retirees, all these benefits for years and years and years, but meantime, the money's disappearing out the back door, laundered through the U.S. Treasury. If we don't deal with this, they have only one way of balancing the books, and that's either delaying the retirement age, which is what France and Russia have done, or lowering life expectancy. Now, the month after the budget deal crashed is when they approved OxyContin, the FDA, and approved predatory lending and predatory lending in the federal programs. And that was the beginning of the slaughter of poor neighborhoods, in ways, and we approved the private prisons too. And you had a huge process that lowered life expectancy in the lower income groups, but the pandemic has taken that up. And if you look at life expectancy in the general population minus the immigration that's happening, in fact, that's what they're doing. They're lowering life expectancy. But if you look at the speed at which the boomers are retiring and the money that is needed, you need total control if you're going to finally reset this and balance the books. And there's been a bank robbery and they don't want to tell you they stole your money.
Is there any way that as a state, Florida could do something for Floridians? Is there any way that we could?
So there's a tremendous amount that can be done, including, looking at where your bank deposits are going and where your pension funds are going. So what I would say, the central bankers voted on the going direct reset in 2019. That's the reset we're talking about that we're in. The World Economic Forum refers to it as the Great Reset. I refer to it as going direct because that's the plan that the central bankers approved officially. We do need a reset, but we need a building wealth reset. And the hardest part for the general population is, if you look at all of us, our culture has been dramatically debased. Our food system has been debased. Our water has been debased. Our air has been debased. And our behavior has been debased. And one of the reasons is we're being incentivized to make ourselves, to conduct ourselves in ways that make us powerless. We're going to have to change. If we wanted to do a building wealth reset, we're going to wake up tomorrow and we're going to be held to standards of, high productivity, and our culture is going to have to change. So it can be done, but again, the question is, how do you get the organization politically and culturally to do it? And it needs to be a big cultural organization.
So one of the things and again, keep chunking it down. Okay, there's a state, county. What about locally? Because in my world, it's building community, supporting the local farmers, supporting the local ranchers, supporting local. So to take it from a city to a county to a state, how do you propose?
You stop financing the national security state and start financing the chummy. So I'll just tell you a funny story because I'm a big believer in no state people. So when I litigated with the federal government for 11 years, and when it started, they had a way of shutting off all income and credit. And at that moment, because I counted it out, I realized I had gifted or lent to family and friends $250,000, $250,000. And over the next 11 years, everybody got together in my family and said, well, I guess she needs it back. And so they started to repay, were loaning me. And after 11 years, I didn't count it up, because I was dealing with the situation. At the end of 11 years, I discovered they had paid back or reloaned $250,000. And that was money that kept me alive. And the feds could never shut it off because it was in the people bank.
By the way, this is Neil Cumming, who is a county commissioner, and dear friends.
A lowly county commissioner.
Nice.
I wanted to ask you about Elizabeth Cash and Kerry. Didn't get to that. But it sounded like he was all that keen on this, at least if he wasn't going to be taken along for the ride. I don't know. He was talking about what sounded like downside to me or the central, but nevertheless, Venmo is pretty good. But anyway, right now, I'm more concerned about an article I read last week about artificial intelligence. Larry Summers said that 5 to 7 years, all the grunt work's going to be gone. Those people are going to be out of the job and they'll be replaced. I can't imagine how that's going to happen. But it kind of gets back to the universal basic income. You know, these folks have been pushing that. Obviously, they would love this new system, I would think. Everybody's going to have nothing and love it, or is that what it's called? Be happy and you get your little car refilled every 30 days. Is that part of this, or a big part of it, or a small part of it?
So I would say that's the market spin. Okay, so I think Neil Kashkari enjoys being free, and he understands the danger of what this come. So I believe he's sincere.
Kind of like us, me too.
Yeah, I think he's totally sincere.
He'll fight.
What?
He'll fight a little bit.
He'll fight a little
Once
bit,
they
yeah.
say, hey, you're
Yeah.
a good deal.
Yeah, so, well, it's, the hardest part of stopping this is it's so hard for sane people to fathom the insane, and that's why we got to come together and realize, okay, we're dealing with people that are insane. So I will tell you, I used to work with Larry Summers, and Larry Summers was one of the key leaders at Treasury who engineered the 21 trillion going missing. So I never believed a word Larry Summers. So I think AI will change the workplace dramatically. But if you look at, if you study AI, and then if you look at what's happening, we just published a thing about AI with Whitney Webb. And AI, it's a cover story for a tsunami of central bank money that's being used to buy central control. Okay, and they're trying to blame it on the technology, when in fact it's a much bigger coup. Okay, we've got a political coup, and they're trying to attribute to technology, and I'm not saying AI been a dramatic combine, but I think it's a bunch of hooey.
Full question. You said the central bankers have a lot of gold. Who owns the gold that they have watching?
So if you go to the World Gold Council, they publish the official statistics of who has what. I don't necessarily believe the official statistics, but it will give you a good feel, not only for who has the gold, but how the gold has been moving east. And they have a wonderful new movie. It's going to be a movie of the week next week on the Solera Report, where they take you into the vaults at the Bank of England, and an official from the Bank of England gives you a wonderful speech on why it's imperative that the central banks own gold. And if you listen to the speech, it's the same speech on why Florida, Tennessee, and all the states should also own gold. It basically gives the speech of why it's important to have central bank insurance supply, one I call it. And one of my favorite quotes is always have enough gold to bribe the border guards. So,
You said two things at the very beginning that I wanted to just kind of connect the dots in case somebody didn't get it. One thing with the World Economic Forum is that it's about control, but it's about more than financial control. Because you look at Ferrari from the World Economic Forum, and he famously has been quoted a million times saying, COVID gave us an opportunity for healthcare to go under the skin. And in the video, they're talking about finances going under the skin. So you're talking, that's all connected. And another thing you said was, I think it was in the first video, they said, stop talking because they still have guns in America. If you think back to, I think it was last year.
Usually Steve Powell's face. I know what he was thinking. It's like, because I used to work with Powell. There are 325 million Americans, and they got war guns to 300 million. He was terrified.
Right. Well, when you were saying they have control, if you looked earlier, I think it was last year, when Discover and a couple of credit card companies at the government's request were monitoring if you bought bullets or if you bought ammunition or if you went to a particular type of store. With central bank digital currency, they can say, you can't spend, they could shut it down immediately.
Right. And they can do it without central bank. They can do it with merchant codes. That's what they're trying to do it with the merchant codes. It's a very excellent point.
Sorry, can I ask you something? You said there's been a bank robbery. Where did the money go?
And
Who has it?
okay, so I can engage in massive conjecture about where it probably went. And I think it went to many places. So, but let me make 2 points about this to keep it simple. If I have a company and I'm building new systems, I run my old systems and I bring up the new systems. And I don't take down the old systems until I've been running both of them, and I'm sure that the new system will work. And then I bring down the old system. Okay. So the old system was the balance of power between the fiscal side of the house and the people's representative and the banking side of the house. And the new system involves techno-feudalism, and part of the pandemic was that, bringing that system up. Now, if I suck my money out of the old system, so I sell 21 trillion to the pension funds, I take the 21 trillion and I move it into the new system. Well, I can give you some theories on how they did it, because they have ways of laundering extraordinary amounts of money, because the BIS and many of the sovereign, the international institutions have sovereign immunity agreements. So you've created an infrastructure of sovereignty immunity that you lose to launder, and the BIS is allowed to hold an infinite amount of money on its balance sheet without disclosing it in its financial statements. So you move that money into the new system now. $21 trillion if it's earning 5% a year. How much is that? That's enough to run a world government from a private intel, right? So I think they simply moved the legal jurisdiction of that money into a new legal jurisdiction. I remember when I worked at HUD, I was in a meeting with the secretary, and he got furious at one of the regional administrators for doing something. And the regional administrator was defending himself, but he said, "Mr. Secretary, I had to do that. That was the law." And the secretary exploded in anger, spit flying, and said, the law, I don't have to obey the law. I report to a higher moral authority." And that was the attitude. The attitude is, there's this new system, and as long as they say it's okay, we can do it. And the neocons were very, I could tell you story after story. The neocons did not believe, they believed they were above the law and they could operate some,
We're seeing a lot of people that don't believe there's law.
Those who are in the law.
That's all.
Oh, you thought I can see that, so they will look at my incidents of
Real.
it's called that happens. Books. Yeah, there would be a whole lot of incidents of black market, success. I mean, I can see that. When the events can, to me, we all boils down to the education of the next generation. Clearly, so then we need acting to be turning the system or fighting.
So I have to tell everybody the red button story. So you know the red button. How many people here have heard the red button story? Okay. So what I want to say is, I used to have a pastor say, if we can face it, God can fix this. Now, there are many things we can do, but we have to understand how we got into the trap if we're going to get out. So let me tell you about our complicity in this trap. So this is how I learned, I sort of learned it. I was writing, when I started on this journey, I was writing a lot about the missing money, but I was also writing a lot about narcotics trafficking. I had grown up in a poor neighborhood, so my neighborhood destroyed by head mortgage fraud and narcotics trafficking. So I was writing about that. And I had a wonderful healthcare practitioner invite me to a conference outside of Philadelphia. It's a group of about 100 people who gather and talk about how to evolve our society spiritually. It's the very spiritually committed, very well educated. So I was giving a speech called How the Money Works on Organized Crime, and it was meant to be light, funny description of the intersection between organized crime cash flows and Wall Street and Washington. And it later became a very famous article called Narco Dollars for Beginners. And I'm in the middle of the speech, and I'm talking about congressional testimony in 1998, where the testimony was about the Iran-Contra drug dealing through Mena, Arkansas. So you had the Bushes and the Clintons all teamed up, and with the U.S. intelligence agencies were basically running drugs through Mena, Arkansas as part of the whole crack cocaine explosion during the 80s. And there's a very famous book called Dark Alliance, later became a movie by a guy named Gary Webb. Anyway, and so I was talking about the fact that a reporter I was working with had been told by a Department of Justice spokesperson during the testimony that the U.S. government launders $500 billion to $1 trillion a year of all illegal funds. So that's not just narcotics, that's illegal gambling, that's sex slave trafficking, is everything. And so I said to this wonderful group of spiritually evolved people, well, what happened if we stopped being the global leader in money laundering? So we had a little conversation. They said, well, the money would leave the New York Stock Exchange, go to Hong Kong and Singapore, and we'd have trouble financing the government deficits, or our taxes might go up, our government checks might stop. I said, okay, there's a big red button up here on the left turn. If you push that button, you can stop all narcotics trafficking in your town, your county tomorrow, thus offending the people who control 500 billion to $1 trillion a year of all dirty money and the accumulated capital thereon. Year after year after year. Who here will push the button? And out of 100 people that each need to evolve your society spiritually, guess how many would push the button? Oh, that's one. So if I had voted, it would have been 2. So I said to the other 99, why would you not push the button? They said, we don't want our government checks to stop. We don't want our taxes to go up. And we don't want our IRAs and 401ks to go down. Okay? And what I discovered that day, the problem was not that they would not push the button. The problem was you cannot, you can make money liquidate the population by poisoning your children, but you cannot build larger wealth doing that. So our addiction to dirty money was basically destroying our society. And the problem was we didn't feel safe to get into the adventure room and talk about, okay, how could we turn the red button green? How could we make money pushing the red button? Because then we could push the red button. We have fiduciary obligations. We have to, make money. We have to support our kids. How can we do it? There has to be a way to do it. You can't just sit here and liquidate the children in your society. So you have to understand politically, I sat in Washington for many, many years. We've gotten involved with our own money, and we are complicit. So one of the things, if you come to Slick, we have a great article called Coming Clean. And it started for me when I was, and I've written a lot about criminality by one of the biggest banks in the country. I won't say their name because we have wonderful government officials here, but you can figure it out pretty quickly. And if you go to my website, but I was writing a check on their private wealth management of this bank. And I was trying to stop the mortgage fraud, and my hand froze. And I said, why am I banking at the bank that is doing all this mortgage fraud? And I said, I have to come clean. And it took me 2+ years to get my money and my personal and business accounts out of the banks who were engaged in the criminality and into really wonderful, great banks. And it began a process where I just tried to clean up my own life and my own money. And the more of us who do it, the more powerful it can be.
I want to say about the money. Overall in the U.S., 30% of deposits per state go into community banks. Okay? The state of North Dakota is the only state that has a sovereign state bank. 83% of those deposits go into community banks. So with Florida losing over 4% of our community banks a year, and this is another one of my big pushes, and I don't know how to get it done to bring in the idea, and I don't know if it is a sovereign state bank in Florida, because I can only concentrate in Florida. We need to build the community banks and the community banking industry back up, and we need to be friendlier to them with whatever reason they're getting shut down, bought out, whatever. Because again, the community banks care about the community. Community banks care about mom and pop, small businesses. They care about creating.
But they grow the tax base.
They grow the tax base. So with us losing over 4% of our community banks a year, that is not good. So that's
Something back here. How do we determine what is truly community banks that you're talking about versus maybe just one of the smaller banks that they have 10 branches in the area? So I usually look at who owns, who governs, who, and where their deposits come from as where they're doing loans. So it's really, what is the percent of activity in that area? So I look at ownership, I look at governance, I look at management, and generally a really good community bank only has branches within a given state jurisdiction. So there are 2 things that's hilarious. One is how to find a good local bank, public, and then we did a 4-part series on how to build a successful relationship with a great bank. So you might want to check that out.
And if I could, that is a bank was Basel pretty fully that your money was better protected. Is there any truth to that?
So that's so there's no doubt if you have a well capitalized bank. In my experience, the best banks have exceptionally good governance and exceptionally good management. And that's not something you can do with mathematical statistics. And they are deeply rooted in with their community and have great loyalty with the next community.
In this world, it's a public credit union. Just saying.
We got a wealth manager kid comment out there. That's perfect.
It's true. Big one.
I made a liquid question. I have to think about it for a moment.
I got here.
Already said.
The federal government outlawed ownership of gold. Would that affect us? Because now, if they implement us saying you can't own gold like you did up till about 71, 72, would that affect us? I mean, if I've got my
So in theory, if they tried to do it again, now I think the chances of them doing it are very small. And the reason is when they outlawed gold, first of all, they only got the gold that was at the banks. They never went after, with one exception, they never went after people who kept the gold.
No.
So most people never tried the gold and then just kept it at home. But that was where the money was. So if you looked at family wealth when they did that, most family wealth was controlled and directed by the families themselves, instead of institutionalizing. Now all the money is in the IRA stuff for own case of retirement accounts and pension funds. So if they start grabbing money, that's what they're going to do. And in fact, they have been doing all along, because if you sell 21 trillion of treasuries to pension funds, or half of that to pension funds, and then the money disappears out the back door, that's, you're basically confiscating those funds.
That's good.
That makes sense?
wing. I'm back.
Okay.
That's the different. What it is? Oh, okay. Regarding the community banks, one thing that I have done research on is the requirements, and that's what makes the taxing on them is the Basel III requirements. That's where they're not able to keep up for the major banks. How do we help the community banks with this regulation, where they don't have to have as high reserve requirements as the majors?
So I don't know enough to answer that question. Probably is there a bank for it? Can you answer it?
Or is there Florida regulation around any of that? Or do we know?
It's got like artists, so like I define it.
Right. I'll tell you the biggest problem that Florida banks have, I expect, is the thing that Tennessee banks has. And that is the regulation is increasingly designed to get them to put the money in the investment account and buy treasuries instead of making local loans. And, and I think Basel III is part of that. It's engineering the money so it can be centrally controlled. The other problem they have is, the problem is not that banks are selling out to bigger banks or going away. The problem is that new banks aren't being started. And the reason they're not being started is because of the rules and regulations, including the account.
Oh, wait.
Go.
Sorry.
I got more of a statement, talking about community and the red buttons story that you told. And I find that at the heart of it, we could talk about all the ideas, but I feel it needs to be a ground up, caring for each other. I watch so many things going on in our communities. I work a lot with the vaccinated and they're being left behind. Think of January 6th, you think of the truckers in Canada where they shut down their accounts. And they don't do it to everybody at the same time. So everybody goes, it's not me. And they push it off and they don't have enough foresight or care. And I think until we get to the point where we care for each other and realize next, we're not going to get these things done because we're just not willing to risk. And there's not enough resolve to take the risk to get this stuff done.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why the critical issue before us is organization. How do we organize politically, in a way where we understand? I have a copy over here of our latest wrap-up. It's called Dutch Farmers and Fishermen. It's about the European farmers and fishermen. and how they fit into the controls. And it was written so that everyone in around them could understand. They're just the tip of the spear. All my neighbors thought, oh, if they take the land from the farmers, I'm still right because of, they're bad because of this, that. They try and pick these off. Right? Absolutely.
Every little last.
And one of the reasons we wrote this is to make sure every one of my neighbors, everybody in the Netherlands knew, look, these guys are fighting their fight because if they lose, they're coming for your property next. That's up to honey.
Yeah, I want to just make a statement about the community banks. John Sullivan had. I have a good friend or I've banked with over the years, who's a community banker, and he sold the bank, turned down a lot of offers, but I'll sell it to a larger institution. He come through the recession with perfect credit, just beautiful results, way better than any other major banks in Florida. And I said, why did you sell? I knew he kind of wanted to do that at some point. He's a lot of shareholders was pressure at some point, and he sold to a credit team. So it was really a merger of wow. And he did it because he wanted the ethics of that institution. Now they're still running a commercial lending institution, growing inside a credit union, right? 60-year-old. So it's a really good way to do it. But I said, what really drove you to get out? Was it just the pressure on the shareholders to get some, whatever? He said, no, it was the regulations, period.
Technocracy.
Regulations, period. He said that the required education of his staff, similar staff from A to B, went from $20,000 to $1 million per year to teach inclusion and diversity. And he said, I don't have anything wrong. I'm happy with inclusion and diversity because he has it throughout the bank, but it went from $20,000 to $1 million. The bank next to him, any of the large banks, were not required to do anything, right? They zero requirement, right? So there's no even playing field on many of these regulations. Not just liquidity, but just...
Right, but it's an intentional game to get them to sell.
And again, thankfully, our wonderful governor has put a hard stop to that as well. Again, if y'all don't know this, I absolutely love DeSantis, and I am glad he's staying around for another 2 years because I really, really, really want to button Florida up, and so does he. And the thing is, right now in Florida, we have what I consider the trifecta. We've got the House, we've got the Senate, we've got a fabulous governor. And so you all also have to understand the process is slow. It's not an overnight. He doesn't have a scepter. He can't just wave a wand and go, bing, shallot on some days. However, we do have, they're in our corner and they are fighting for us, for the Floridians, for what is best for Florida.
Right. The courts and legislature follow the culture. And that's why what you said about the bottom up and caring about each other is dead on. So I do have to say, I opened up with the sane versus the insane. I will tell you that part of the sane versus the insane was this, divine versus demonic.
Right.
So we are facing demonic forces, whether they act in the material world and that's why prayer, use cash, but also use prayer. And that we have to organize to deal with that. The divine have to organize and gather together and deal.
And I also want to, again, thank you all. We are our time and honoring our time. We are getting to round up.
Yes, hi. I'm Kay Sullivan. I'm the board president of Children's Health Defense. It's a pleasure to be here. And Catherine, what an honor it is to have you before this group. And Saga, I have not met you, but thank you very much for bringing Catherine here because she's a world expert, and to have her right here in the local area, I think it is a tremendous opportunity for all of us here. So I thank you both. But I also wanted to just tell you about something that is available, and it's not quite, I have the date, but the invitation is still being formulated. So I just actually learned about it today before I came in here. But there's going to be a virtual town hall meeting.
Wonderful.
Coming up May the 16th. So the date is that, and the invitation is likely to be completed May 2nd or earlier. So I know there's been some discussion about the WHO, the power grab, a lot of concern about that. And I think somebody mentioned here it'll be a lot more than just financial takeover. It's a pretty complete takeover, and it's a great concern to many of us that know about it. And the vote is taking place the weekend of May, beginning May the 27th. So we have less than a month for about a month before this potentially could be voted upon. And there's lots of reasons why I think we would not want that to happen. So I'm just thinking, I imagine the people that attended today signed in for Saga.
Yes, and I want you all to know we're all recording this. It is not live streamed because it's a very private conversation. We are recording it. Put your email address down there, and I will send you links to a lot of the things that Catherine talked about. If you send me a link to that, I'd be
That's
happy
what I
to
was
send this
thinking.
out.
I would be
Just
happy.
give me a little bit of time to get everything together. It's not going to happen tomorrow, I assure you. But
Everything you do is immediate. It's amazing.
so we will be getting information out to you, and eventually we will be getting.
So I just have to go for a tangent for a second. Kay Sullivan, you are responsible for my new favorite thought. You know, Mary Holland gave it to me, and I immediately ordered 6 copies and gave it to all my friends. Could you just tell everybody quickly?
Yes, I actually brought a couple to everybody. I thought Saga might like one in
I
case
would
she
love
doesn't
one.
have one. This is actually called Holy Moments. And you know, it's when you think about the ways in which we have encounters with people, you know, we're all of us here are working on some of the big ideas, right? But we don't want to overlook the simple, casual opportunities we have to change people's lives.
Right.
So, you know, you've heard a lot about the divide, how we're so isolated from one another. Well, this is one, I consider this an instrument that may help us heal the divide and maybe even create the more beautiful world our hearts knows is possible. So I'm glad to know.
And you can get 6 copies
Yes.
for free.
And I've done that multiple times, so I've been able to get out many books, and I've got a couple with me today.
Thank
And
you.
the last thing I wanted to say about this virtual town hall meeting that's taking place is that there will be people from around the world that will be participating, and also we expect to have capacity for 40 to 50,000 people. So
Wonderful.
this is straight from Mary. And as I said, I just heard about it. In fact, it was one of our board members that suggested a virtual town hall. So I'm delighted to get to tell her after I leave here today that it's going to happen. So thank you all.
Thank you. And then Rebecca, you have.
Very good.
Oh, we like spec. Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to bring it back around when you were talking about the culture and making sure that the people know. So as we're wrapping up, what can we all have a circle of influence? And we know that this is a very big picture conversation that we've had. But like Saga said, I care about Florida. So I want to make sure what can we leave here with is what we can work on next for our legislation. What can we work on next for the future to really bring it in? You know, each of us, what message can we tell our neighbors about that we're going to work on this piece or this is the next piece that we can? Because I do think it's an elephant that we have to do one bite at a time. What's the first bite that we can start with to take away from it?
Okay, so the first thing I would do, you can do education. You can do promoting the use of cash. You can do prayer. And then you could also communicate with your legislative representatives and political representatives. So if you go to Solari, there is a post called The Threat of Financial Transaction Control. And it has these 3 videos, or 3 of the 4 videos I show. We also have CBDC video shorts up on the website. And I would encourage you to download these videos and use them to educate people because they're quick, they're 1 minute, and they help people really get galvanized and understand them. And to every person who you educate, you could say, start using cash. And that's a simple one. Or prayer, because prayer absolutely can help. The other thing you can do is you can download what is financial transaction freedom, what threatens it, and what can we do about it? And you can look at those ideas and see, are there any ideas there that you're led to do something about? You also have a great article called I Want to Stop CBDCs, What Can I Do? So if you do the cash, you do the education, you do the prayer, and then you look at the other things you can do and like helping you with some of the things you're doing in Florida. Well, there's a wealth of things you can do and just feel, do the thing you can do. If everybody does what they can do, it's a revolution.
And also, I want to say again, I am more than happy to come and talk if you have a small group or someplace you want me to come and talk, I'm learning I'm getting there, but I can at least help get people started with where they are. And like I say, all the links, everything that Catherine mentioned, the links from Solari, we will send out an email, make sure that your email address is on there, because all of you were invited here for a reason, because you come from different walks of life, different circles of influence, different places. And in my world, the more minds together, the better, because all of us have different things that we're good at, different things we can do. And again, collectively, we can make this happen. And I think, and it's like when Tim and I, we say grace every time we eat our food. And the thing is, if you use that as a prayer cue, and even at that time, pray for your city, pray for different things, because there really truly is power of prayer. And to leave on a huge note of hope, God is not a loser. Okay? We are definitely facing a lot of evil. God gave you the tools. You have to pick them up and use them. So also talk to your pastors, talk to your church, get church groups together, because the power of prayer is so incredibly important. So that's one.
So I just have to say one thing before I leave. So my favorite Bible story is the story in Gideon. And essentially, I'm a great interview with Thomas Warren that goes through the whole thing in great detail. But essentially, what the angel of the Lord tells Gideon is, look, we need confident, faithful people to work through, to build the incompetent guys to go home and tell the people who are not faithful to go home. So when you called, started to talk to me, I turned to Elizabeth and I said, okay, this one is faithful and this one is confident. I said, okay, we're going to Florida. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet you, to meet your wonderful husband, Tim, your friends. We had great steaks last night, local grass-fed steaks, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to come to Florida. The Ellie Playground. There's a great opportunity.
It's an honor and pleasure to meet you, because I've been going to Solari school for a while and John Titus school for a while. And it's like, and Elizabeth and I have been talking for the past year. It's like, and then we start, can we charge? And I look at it truly as a divine thanks, the divine connection while you're here now, because it did work out. So having said all that, thank you all again so very, very much for taking time out of your busy days. We will get links to, we do have packages for those heading back to Tallahassee and to your office.
Positive taxation. We have it up here as it does.
So thank you all very, very much. And a very, very warm thank you for Mexican.
Thank you.
Listen.